Hey guys, welcome back. Okay, so at the time of its development, Sony desperately needed an exclusive FPS to directly challenge Microsoft's colossal success, the Halo franchise. But let's just take away that Halo killer marketing bullshit and simply examine it as a video game from a modern lens. And let's start with its story, because if there's one thing that Guerrilla Games absolutely nailed right out of the gate, it's the world building. Like, the whole narrative is set long after Earth got uninhabitable by a nuclear fallout in the mid-21st century. And the surviving governments then pooled their resources, formed an international order called the United Colonial Nations, or the UCN, and started colonizing the stars. So they found two main planets, Vecta, which is basically an Earth-like planet, and Helgen, a barren, toxic wasteland. And enter the Helgen Corporation, a large mining conglomerate, but like they got too greedy or something. So the UCN then hits them with sanctions, the Helgen Corp pushed back, and boom, we get the first extrasolar war. The UCN then sends in their military, the Interplanetary Strategic Alliance, or the ISA, to kick the corporation off planet Vecta. So the exiled colonists are kinda like forced to pack their stuff and settle on the hellscape that is planet Helgen. But the environment is so incredibly harsh here that it straight up mutates them. They kinda like become stronger and lose their ability to breathe oxygen, I think, forcing them to wear respirators with air tanks just to survive. So basically they stop being normal humans and become the Helghast. And enter Scholar Visari, and this guy is basically Space Hitler, and I'm not exaggerating even a bit. He's this ruthless authoritarian who weaponizes his people's centuries of suffering. He convinces them that they aren't just survivors, they're like the next step in human evolution. Like they're genetically superior to the weak and corrupt humans of Earth and Vecta. So he rebuilds their military and decides it's time to take their old home back. And he eventually launches a surprise attack to reclaim Vecta, kicking off the second extrasolar war. So the game begins right as this invasion hits Vecta. You play as Captain Jan Templar, a veteran ISA officer whose primary personality trait is just following orders. Anyways, your squad gets wiped out during the assault, and you're fighting outside Vecta City to link up with Central Command. So this invasion is like a huge success for the Helghast because Vecta's solar defense was somehow completely bypassed. It's like someone left the front door wide open. But then it's quickly revealed that ISA's own General Adams is a treasonous collaborator. So Adams sold out his entire planet for promises of power in the new Helgen Empire. And he actively orchestrates the killing of his own people and then has the audacity to rant about how the ISA is soft and corrupt. He even goes as far as framing his superior General Vaughton for the betrayal and having him murdered so he can take total control of the solar defense platform. And his ultimate goal is to use this to blast the incoming UCA reinforcement fleet before they can save the planet. So, Templar has to gather a ragtag squad of misfits, fight through the war-torn slums of Vecta, assassinate the Helghast Commander General Joseph Lente, and ultimately storm that SD platform to put a bullet in Adam's skull. Anyways, the whole story is shockingly cynical for a 2004 shooter, like it portrays war as miserable, mostly orchestrated by self-serving politicians and ideological fanatics. There's a very real anti-war sentiment buried under all the shooting. But what truly carries the narrative is the cast. Rather than forcing you to stay locked in a single protagonist, Killzone actually gives you a 4-person playable squad that constantly bickers and generally acts like a group who would rather be absolutely anywhere else than here. So Jan Templar is your standard vanilla hero. Then you have Luger, a female shadow marshal and Templar's former lover, and she's like this cold, calculating assassin. Then there's Colonel Haka, a half-human, half-Helghast defector who acts as the intellectual, emotionless spy of the group. And finally there's Rico. Okay, so Rico is a character so profoundly angry and emotionally unstable that his mere presence tests the sanity of anyone holding the controller. His entire platoon was wiped out by the Helghast, which explains his anger, but it doesn't excuse the fact that he makes terrible decisions and spends 90% of the game screaming profanities. The dude harbors real genocidal hatred for anything with red eyes, which leads to him constantly threatening to murder Haka solely because of his half-Helghast origin. But the dynamic between Rico and Haka is easily the most entertaining part of the entire script. So look, they aren't superheroes or anything. They're just exhausted, traumatized soldiers navigating a political disaster, and this makes the narrative feel kinda grounded.
Even a monkey will write Shakespeare, given enough time.
So you two agree on something. Get over it. We attack the firebase. Let's move out.
What the fuck is a Shakespeare?
Okay, let's move on to the visuals and the art style real quick, cause like Guerrilla Games pushed the PlayStation 2 so far beyond its limits that I'm genuinely surprised. So from a pure art direction standpoint, the game has a very oppressive and a miserable atmosphere. The visual palette is overwhelmingly brown and grey, which is like the complete opposite of Halo. And the game also has this heavy film grain filter to simulate the look of a dirty war documentary, which honestly does a lot of heavy lifting to hide some of the muddy textures. And to further mask the console's inability to render large environments, the devs added some fog in some places. So you spend a lot of time running through destroyed malls, ruined urban slums, and beaches that look like D-Day. And we can't forget about the iconic design of the Helghast themselves. With their long trench coats, breathing masks, and those glowing red eyes, the Helghast remain one of the best enemy designs. Seeing a squad of those red eyes was a genuinely intimidating experience back then, and it sells the horror of the invasion real well. And finally, we got to talk about some of the animations, specifically the weapon handling and reloading. So in an era where most shooters had stiff and robotic weapon movements, Killzone had these weighty and pretty satisfying reload animations. Like the devs made it where the camera kinda tilts to the bottom right during a reload. And you gotta respect the sheer commitment to making the player feel the physical clumsiness of operating a gun under extreme duress. Okay, so this brings us to the gameplay, and if there's this one thing about the OG Killzone, it's the fundamental feel of playing it. So Guerrilla Games made a very intentional design choice to make the game feel realistic, but the actual execution feels so unnecessarily heavy. Like the movement is slow, and even sprinting has this heavy feel to it. There's no jump button whatsoever, an omission that was actually criticized at the time and feels even more insane today. Instead, you walk up to obstacles and wait for a prompt to appear to vault over. Also, the whole aiming feels kinda sluggish, as if the weapon itself weighs 80 pounds or something. But again, it was a deliberate choice to simulate the exhaustion of a soldier carrying heavy gear, which I know kinda makes sense, but Anyways, the gunplay itself is pure chaos. Weapon accuracy in this game is, to put it mildly, a total joke. Like firing your assault rifle in full auto guarantees that every single bullet will completely miss the target, and like the game forces you to tap fire in short bursts just to hit a guy standing 20 feet away. But I mean, it kinda makes sense cause they were just going for that whole realism vibe, you know? Anyways, the arsenal is divided largely between ISA and Helghast weapons, and the differences are profound. Like the ISA assault rifle is your bread and butter. It's a reliable, relatively accurate weapon equipped with a lethal secondary fire, an underbarrel grenade launcher. On the other side, you have the Helghast assault rifle, and this thing is an absolute bullet hose with a massive 50-round mag. It kicks like a mule and is wildly inaccurate, and its secondary fire mode is a shotgun. And like the rest of the weapons actually do add a bit of variety, but they aren't anything special. Moving on, the enemies here are kinda sponge-like. Like you'll shoot half-dozen rounds into a Helghast soldier before he finally decides to fall over and die. The enemy AI is this mix of somewhat genius and pure stupidity. Sometimes the enemy will flank you and toss grenades with terrifying accuracy. Other times they'll run directly into a wall and stare blankly into the abyss while you shoot them. But for me, the true villain of the game is the atrocious checkpoint system. So the game relies on autosave points that feel like they're spaced miles apart. Getting killed by an off-screen sniper or suffering an unlucky grenade bounce means you gotta replay 15 minutes of grueling, slow-paced sections. Ammo scarcity also becomes an issue in the later stages of the game. Like if you insist on keeping your favorite ISA weapons, you'll most likely run out of bullets. The game actively forces you to scavenge dropped Helghast weaponry just to survive the later chapters, which again kinda enforces the narrative theme of desperation, but mostly just pisses you off because the Helghast guns are so inaccurate. But I feel like what the game lacks in pacing, it actually makes up for in its replayability. The inclusion of 4 playable characters isn't just some cheap narrative gimmick, it kinda alters the level design and your entire approach to combat. At the start of each level, you get to choose which member of the squad you wanna control, and the game adapts to your choice. Like if you pick Yan, you get the standard vanilla FPS experience. You basically fight through using standard cover and standard guns. It's fine, but it's the most basic way to play. However, if you select Luger, the game opens up with exclusive traversal options. Cause she's an agile shadow marshal, she can interact with specific cables to climb up to higher elevations or crawl through narrow ventilation shafts. This sorta lets you bypass drawn-out fights entirely. And choosing Haka changes the dynamic yet again. As a half-Helghast spy, his physiology lets him waltz straight past deadly laser trip mines without triggering them, and this opens up different shortcuts and lets you access hidden weapon caches. Furthermore, his background gives him an increased carrying capacity for Helghast weapons. Finally, selecting Rico throws all subtlety and stealth completely out the window. Basically, playing as Rico is the closest this game ever gets to a traditional arcade run and gun. Also, he has a large health pool, heavy armor, and a machine gun. And these AI companions are also literally immortal, meaning they can soak up bullets all day while yelling at you. So like, this squad system gives some incentive to replay the 10-hour campaign if you really wanna. So like, looking at this game over 2 decades after its launch is a really complex endeavor. Like, the controls are heavy, the aiming is kinda not perfect, the color palette is a mix of browns and grays, and the lack of a jump button feels archaic. And like, it's sorta understandable why the game received mixed reviews back in 2004, completely failing to live up to the absurd marketing campaign that Sony forced upon it. But despite its undeniable list of flaws, Killzone is about the misery of warfare, and they kinda succeeded in that. The weight of the weapons, the sound design, the reload animations, and a political storyline create an atmosphere that very few games have ever managed to replicate. No, it didn't kill Halo, it didn't even come close to it. But what it did do was lay the foundation for Killzone 2 and 3. Anyways, thanks for watching guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.